All right. And let's see. Let's go to the first one. Okay. I am just going to run through the slides and kind of talk about them. And there's quite a few slides. There's 99 or 100 of them. And this is kind of a working thing instead of me just blasting stuff at you. If you want to ask a question, if you want me to go to a different slide, ask me why I did what I did or anything like that, just chime right in, okay? All right, so this first slide you're looking at here is the roundhouse after it's been completed from the aisle side. And it kind of takes up that whole side. But the thing is the way I got it set up, I want it with the roof off while you operate, because the shops and the roundhouse, I want them to be an integral part of everything going on in Phillips. And this slide right here is just to kind of orient you to the layout. If you look on the left side of the slide, you'll see Phillips. You'll see mill, yard, mill in the middle where it says yard, Phillips down below it. That's where Phillips is on my layout. It takes up pretty much that whole left wall there. And then as I build my layout, I refer to topographical maps. I refer to blueprints. I refer to surveys, photos, anything that I can get my hand on to make it more accurate. So this one just kind of orients you to my Phillips section. All right, and then this is from an original blueprint from when Maine Central took over the railroad in 1908 or whatever. They did a survey of the entire railroad, and this blueprint came from that. And I don't know who ended up with it, but I ended up getting it off of eBay. I forget how much I paid for it, but the thing's about 6 feet long, and it includes the whole town of Phillips and the entire setup there. So it was really useful. And then this is out of Ride the Sandy River. It kind of simplifies what's in the blueprint. It's not as accurate as the blueprint. But you can see to the left, the covered bridge. To the right is the factory. And then that whole area in between there is yard on my layout. One of the things that I did coming out of the roundhouse there, you'll see it goes down to a single track that runs down to the clothespin factory, which was the International Mill. Because of space constraint, I extended the yard all the way through there where it crosses Pleasant Street in Maine, so that there are 3 tracks running in between. Otherwise, there's just in HOn30 in a compacted form, there's not enough room for switching and breaking down and building up trains. All right, so getting to the shops and the roundhouse themselves, this is 1923 drawing. I got this off of Gary's box site, and this was my Bible right here. There were changes along the way. They started out with apparently a 5-stall roundhouse and then expanded it to a 10-stall roundhouse. Originally, there's a brick wall right down the middle, which would have been the original outer wall, right down the middle of the roundhouse. And you can, if you look close, you can see it there on the blueprint. And then behind the roundhouse, the large middle square structure, that's the machine shop. In the upper left-hand corner of the machine shop, the office is in there in the corner. And then down to the lower right of the machine shop is the stock room. Back to the machine shop, if you go to the lower left, that's the blacksmith shop. And then to the left of the machine shop is the car shop, which is still there today. At some point, you see there's 2 tracks that went into the car shop. At some point, they got rid of that lower track, the one that goes into the center of the building, and bricked up that wall and put a window in it. So what I did, because I had to compress a lot of this, I ended up putting in 7 stalls instead of 10 in the roundhouse. I made the walls the full scale size on the roundhouse. The car shop, I made it long enough to put one of the coaches in with a little bit of room at either end. And then I narrowed it. You'll see there's like 3 bays from top to bottom, the length of the shop. There's 3 bays. I narrowed it to 2 to fit onto the layout. And then the machine shop, the blacksmith shop, and the stock room, because the rails going into the roundhouse, the rails going into the car shop bracket the whole facility. I filled in the middle between the roundhouse and the car shop, compressing it to fit into the space that I had available, and yet still being able to run a coach length car into the machine shop from that entrance. You see where the track goes in at the top of the diagram there. Oh, and while I'm talking about it, if you could see this thing up close, it tells you where all the skylights are. It tells you where the floors were concrete, where they were cinder, where they were wood. It shows you where the steel posts were to support the roof framing. It tells you all of that. And originally I intended to keep the flooring original to the prototype, but with the space I had available and all the other complexities I had to take in, I ended up just making everything concrete. And I used a lot of photos of the prototype during planning and construction. And there are a lot of things that the photos clarified that are not the same as they are in the drawings. And I attribute that to modifications that they made along the way through the years. This is the spot where the facilities in Roundhouse go before I laid any track in Phillips. I was putting in structures where I want them to go and figuring eyeball mode where everything was going to fit. Then I took the drawing of the facilities from Gary's box, made a copy of it, which was an 8.5 by 11, and then in sections enlarged it on the photocopier until the drawing was approximately 90% of the original. I did it to 90% because when I started trying to get bigger, it started distorting and getting real fuzzy anyway. But the other thing was I knew I was going to compress this facility in, anyway. So I figured 90% should be about right for when I compress it, just for planning purposes to lay the template onto the layout. So I put the template on the layout and pinned it down with push pins and then plan in the track. And when I laid the track, when I put down the road bed and everything, I cut into the template so that the tracks would enter the car shop and the machine shop where they were actually going to enter the model when I built it onto the layout. And then I had some fudge factor with the roundhouse because I knew I was cutting it down to 7 stalls. I started with the roundhouse, making sure that fit first within the space that was allotted for it. I don't know if that made sense or not. Okay, in this slide here, you'll see the yard area there, and you'll see the all the various tracks going in. The one that you see with at the bottom rails, you'll see it goes in from the left into the template. That's the car shop. The one that goes in from the right side, that's going into the machine shop template. And then there was a track. If you look at the left side of the car shop, there's a spur that does a back cut there and heads out toward the west side of town. Originally, that track there would have been going into the second stall of the car shop, and it would have been separate without a turnout there, and it entered from up by Main Street. So there would have been a turnout up there at the end of it to the left, coming out of the main line that comes out of the covered bridge. You can just barely see the covered bridge. There was a turnout there just after you cross the street that went down toward the car shop. But because I couldn't fit the turnouts in with the space I had and still have Main Street there and the bridge, I made it as a spur, a cutback that comes off the car shop track, just so I have that space there for storage for snow plows and whatnot. And it's as true to the original as I could get with the space I had, but it was a compromise. And so I like to work from the back toward the front because I've had problems on different sections of my layout where I laid the track first and then I started putting in all of the buildings and everything, and end up doing some breakage when I have to go back into the layout. So I've gotten to where I'm working from the back of the layout toward the front, doing the work as I move toward the front of the layout. So like this next shot here, that's the Wilbur track you see there with the Wilbur store, and to the left you can see the station. So I did all the scenery back there and, ballasting and everything else, working my way toward the facilities. So once I was done with all of the background area there, then I put in the bump out, which I knew I was going to be doing to fit the roundhouse in anyway. I knew that when I put the bench work in. But I left the bump out off until I got done that background work, so I wouldn't have to lean so far. So there's the bump out, and I based the bump out off the template. I put a piece of cardboard overhanging the bench work, put the template down on it, and then drew along the edge of the roundhouse and facilities onto the template, and then based the cutting for the wood and assembling it off of that. All right, so then I put in the ground. I always paint it brown or paint it green, depending on what I'm going to be putting in, so it helps me visualize what I'm going to be doing in the future instead of looking at raw styrofoam and stuff like that. And I put in the fascia because in other areas where I'd done all of the scenery first, then put the fascia in some places I've got big gaps that I then have to go back and fill in with scenery. So this way, what I did, I put the fascia in first, and then as I did scenery, I put wax paper tucked in over the fascia to keep it clean while I was doing the work, and that way the scenery can go all the way to the fascia. This is also from Gary's box site, and what I did was I scaled this on the photocopier to HO scale. This is a 1903 drawing of the roundhouse. And what I wanted off of this was the doors. I wanted the wall section that you see up at the top, because when you look at the roundhouse in photos, it's all the same brickwork. The windows are all the same size. They're all spaced the same distance apart. The colonnades are all standard and everything like that. So with this one piece of template, I could make all of the walls basically for the roundhouse. The doors, when you look down at the bottom drawing, the doors, it shows those as exterior, okay? But some of the doors on the facilities have the framing on the exterior like that, but the roundhouse itself, the framing is on the inside of the doors. You wouldn't see it on the outside like this. You'd only see that framing when you open the door up. And you'll see it in pictures that I'm going to bring up later. There are exceptions on the rest of the facility, but the roundhouse had the framing on the inside. One of the things, if you look at this part in the middle here between the wall and the face of the roundhouse, that shows the way the roof was. And you're looking at it as you're looking into the stalls from the front. I don't know why they did this. It made sense to them. They angled the roof so that the pitch goes in and down. And then there was a drainage pipe. So the water collected in the roof and then went down a drain pipe through the roundhouse and into the ground to a sewer or whatever. I don't know why they did it like that. I can't imagine how many tons of weight that would have added to the roof with water or snow, either one. It doesn't make sense why they would do it like that. And I didn't do it like that, mainly for ease, because I made my roof removable. And if I tried to make it true to the original like that, it would have been a lot harder to do. So I just didn't. Okay, and see, now this is typical of the brickwork. When the template that it was in the last slide, you see how the colonnades are, the arches to the windows with brick. They have that gray crescent above the window panes that I assume is wood or concrete. I don't know. But anyway, that's very particular to all of the windows around it. Now you see, this is the car shop, and those doors that you see there, that's one of the exceptions. The front of the roundhouse is the reverse of that with the framing on the inside. But this is a good typical chunk of the facilities. Now, the way I did mine, for ever since I started the layout, because when I scratch built the Rangeley Lake house, and even compressed, there's still over 100 windows in the thing when I built it. And cutting all those window holes into plastic was a real pain in the ass. And I wasn't looking forward to that with the roundhouse and facilities. And the other part of that was if I used plastic brick, if I had the roundhouse visible from the inside, I would have had to have had an inner layer of brick and an outer layer of brick, which would have doubled the number of window holes that I have to cut because the brick was exposed inside. And I wanted to model that. You know, it's very particular. You see it in all the photos. So what I did, I found this brick paper. It comes from Italy. You get 16 sheets of it for like $23, I think it is. And it'll last me forever. I mean, I only used 3 or 4 sheets for the entire facilities. So what I did was I took the template, I'd lay it on a piece of 015 plastic. I'd cut out the windows in that sheet plastic. And it didn't matter when you bend it back and forth to crack the windows out if you crack the corners of the windows because it's going to be covered in this brick paper. So it made it a hell of a lot easier. It went fast. So I'd cut out the windows, then I'd laminate a sheet of the brick paper onto that piece of plastic, flip it over, and then just take an 11 blade and cut out the brick paper using the plastic window, the hole for it. I just cut along the edge of the plastic window to cut out that rectangle of brick paper. Then I flipped it over and then laminated another sheet on, flipped it over again, and then cut out the paper again. And it made it really easy to do. It's so much easier than if I had tried to cut brick or plastic brick, you know what I mean, brick sheet. So.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah?
What did you use for glue?
I use CA. I just use regular CA.
Okay.
Yeah. Because with plastic, with the paper, I didn't know, you know, if I used some other kind of glue, if it was going to stay laminated or not. But the CA, I tried it first and tried to peel the paper off, and it didn't come off. It would have ripped apart. So I knew it was going to stay glued and not delaminate a year down the road, you know. And then have a nightmare scenario with the model. So what I did with the colonnades, I just took another strip of 015 or 015 styrene and then put CA on it and then put another piece of brick paper on that strip. And then I would take and run a bead of CA along the edge of the plastic on both sides and then just fold the paper onto the styrene to form the edge of the colonnade so that you wouldn't see the exposed styrene, it'd be all brick. And that worked pretty good. And then I just used strips of styrene up across the top to build up the layers of the brick. And then before I put the window panes in, and those are Grant Line window panes, before I put those in, I took an 11 blade and cut an arch into the brick paper above where the window pane was going to go. And then just took strips of the brick paper and made the eyebrows, glued those on, and then glued the window panes in. And I pre-painted the window panes and everything. And it looks okay, you know. Now, it's not great, you know, it's not going to win an award, but the thing is the size of this project is so big once it's done. You're not looking at little details like that. It's kind of overwhelming to me anyway, you know. I can't believe I did this thing, you know, after it was done. All right, so once I had all these walls pre-constructed, then I went ahead and started the assembly of the roundhouse. I sunk the turntable in where it needed to go, and I made sure that the tracks were going to line up with these doors, right? Now, when I first made the doors, because the dimensions of the roundhouse walls are pretty much true to scale, but with the door frames, with the door holes, I test the locomotives to make sure they're going to go through these things. And at the correct dimensions, scale dimensions, the problem I had was the bigger locomotives are so wide that there wasn't a lot of clearance. And I have like engineers and firemen that are leaning out the windows of locomotives. And when I would try to run in like 23 with a guy hanging out the window of the cab, he'd hit the side of the wall there, the colonnade. So I made them an extra 2 feet on each door opening, and that solved that. So they're a little bit bigger than scale, but it's not enough where you really notice, you know. So putting in those stringers for the roof framing held it all together in basic shape. And then what you'll notice is you'll see the black lines that I put at the corners of the building. Those witness marks are there so that every time I took the roundhouse off to work on it, I could line it back up without having to measure anything. I just put the corners of the roundhouse to where the witness marks were, those black lines at the corners. And after I got the basic shape put together, then I started the framing for the roof. And then after the framing for the roof, I had to mass produce doors. And again, I used the Grant Line window frames, the 2 panes like were in the prototype, and then just V-groove plastic for the door slabs, and then strip cut at the angles depending on the angle of the door framing. You know, I cut them to what they needed to be, and just mass produced them on the chopper. You know, I do as much on a chopper as I can. All right, and there's mass producing the doors, and the doors are in 2 halves, an outer and an inner. So that way the V groove that I used for it, you can see the door planks from both the inside and the outside, which you could on the original. So there's 7 door frames, which is 2 doors per frame with 2 halves. So that's what, 7, 14, 28, I guess, basic door halves to put together after they were made. And okay, here you can see the laminations where I was talking about. I laminate the brick paper on one side of the plastic, cut the window out, then laminate the other side on, and then cut the window out of that. And you'll see that plastic in the middle there of the sandwich, and you can see the colonnade at the corner there where I wrap the brick paper around the strips of plastic to make the colonnades. To finish it up, I just took brick paper, you know, single and double rows of brick paper, and then glued it to the top of the building so that when the roof's off, you see brick and not laminations of paper and plastic. And at this point, I've stained the roofing, and I put in the lintels at the front there where the bay doors are, and then framed the doors where it goes into the machine shop.
A bit longer. I'm on a Zoom meeting right now. Can I call you about an hour? Great. I'll call you about an hour.
Okay, all right. He'll call you in an hour. All righty. Where are we at here? Okay, so for the roof, I used the building as a template itself. I flipped it over. I took, I didn't know this. I was up at the train shop up in Addison, Texas, which is a fantastic place. Evergreen makes giant sheets of styrene. And I didn't know that until I saw them on the shelf back last year at some point. So I took 3 sheets of the styrene, taped them together at the joints over a couple of those rafters there, and then just cut along the edge of the roundhouse about 1/8 of an inch or so out from the edge of the roundhouse with a straight edge. I just went right around the thing and cut out the shape of the roof. And it was glued together, and then I taped it down onto those glued sheets when I did it. Then I flipped it over and overlapped it over some more of those giant sheets of styrene so that the joints are not in the same place. It's overlapped so that no joint's in the same place to give it extra strength so it won't crack apart at a joint. And then I just cut along the edge of the first sheet of plastic. And there's the rough roundhouse with the doors attached and the steel support columns that were there on the prototype. They're in the blueprint. So that's the rough roundhouse right there. And then this is with the roof on, with the you can see the paint still wet for the base coat of paint. But I just laid it on there just to get a good visual of where I was at that point. And I was pretty happy with it. So being happy with it, I went ahead and put on some skylights. There's 2 skylights that are on the roundhouse. You can see I put the smoke jacks on there. There's some pigeons. If you go over to the left, you'd see there's a chimney over there. And where a boiler was apparently, that's what I believe what the chimney was there for. So once I had the roundhouse basically done, then I went ahead and did the car shop, made sure that it was going to line up right. And then the next step was filling that middle part with the machine shop, the stock room, and the blacksmith shop. So now I've made sure that everything lines up. You'll see it's still on the witness marks at the lower left corner there. All right, and over up at the left side, you'll see there's a witness mark there. So having that put in place, then I lined up all of the roadbed and the track and used locomotives while I did it before I glued anything. This was kind of a precarious point because if I made a mistake, you know, we're going to have locomotives that slam into the side of the doors on the way in and out. So once everything was perfectly lined up, then I glued everything down. And then, excuse me. And with that, I just put a bunch of locomotives in there. Those are all brass, just to see how it was going to look, you know, just an inspiration shot. You know, you gotta reassure yourself along the way sometimes that it's going to be right. And what I did with the floor, I did the same thing as I did for the roof. I used the building as a template, put it about 1/8 of an inch out or so, cut along the edge of the outside with a straight edge, and then I used balsa. It's like 1/4 by 1/4 balsa around the outer edges on the bottom of that plastic to build it up like the concrete foundation. And that raised it up to where the floor was on top of the ties to the tracks. And then I put some more reinforcing pieces of balsa in between the tracks to make sure that the floor wouldn't sag anywhere. All right. And then after I did that, I put in the lighting. And those, I'm using, for my layout, I'm using the Just Plug system from Woodland Scenics. I'm not a great electrician. And with this stuff, it's too hard to screw it up. I mean, you plug it into the components, plug it into the wall. You can adjust the dimness or brightness of the lights, you know. It's just too easy. It's foolproof. So what I did is I took like a tester's paint cap, cut out some discs of black construction paper, cut a slit in them, made the cone with it, and then punched a hole through it, put the LED through the hole, glued it in place with CA, then glued the whole thing to the rafters and then down the edge of the wall there. And so after I did that, I tested it out and I was pretty happy with it. I'm like, okay, that's going to look pretty good. It's going to be nice warm effect once I've got the interior done. So here I've painted the slab. I've added in the concrete in between the tracks, and I've weathered it with soot, and then I weathered soot onto the tops of the bays, onto some of the rafters and some of the edges up on the top edges of the walls that are going down the sides of it. I didn't go too heavy on it because I looked at a lot of pictures inside roundhouses and inside like machine shops and whatnot, and the walls were, I mean, literally black in some of these buildings at some point. I couldn't find any good interior shots of the roundhouse. They just kind of don't exist where you can see any detail. But I went light on the soot, so it looks cool, but it doesn't obliterate the detail. And let's see. Okay, one of the things here, there were a couple of compromises on the floor. The back side of it, about the back third, was cinder, and then the front 2/3 was concrete. Well, you know, it was enough complication of the thing getting it right just with plastic without trying to model the soot. And I went over and over in my head, am I going to try to put in the pits or not? And trying to cut the track, lay the rails, make sure it lines up with pits underneath, make sure the pit edges line up with the floor, make sure everything stays in gauge. You know, I just didn't even want to go there. So I just left it with concrete. I think I might go back at some point and where the pit would be in between the rails, just paint it flat black to make it look like it's empty down there, like it's shadow. But at this point, I haven't bothered with it. That's something I might go back and do later on. Okay. And there's another inspiration shot with the ballast and everything on. A couple of locomotives and inspiration shot there. So, you know, I flip back and forth and it's like, yeah, okay, the doors are right. You can see the inside of the door framing on here. The frame is to the inside. The outside of the door is just plain planking. So I've made sure all that's right. 2-pane windows. The smoke jacks look like the smoke jacks are supposed to. All of that. Something that's a mystery here. Gary might know better than I. I looked through a lot of photos. This stack right here, that has got to be coming from a boiler room, but there's no boiler room on the blueprint. You know, everything in there was powered by steam and belt, you know, belt and pulley systems. And that stack is not in town, somewhere outside of the railroad facilities, because when you look at it from different angles, you can tell it comes out of the shop area, but you can't tell out of what shop. And I've read references in the books to a steam plant, you know, a steam room, boiler room, but it's not on the blueprints. So, you know, I don't know, you know, maybe I'll just put a stack somewhere that looks like it makes sense at some point. Okay, so at this point, I put some details inside and turned it on with the lights. And I like the way it looks. You know, I'm really getting worked up. It's getting pretty sexy. So I've added a bunch of details, and when you look close, you know, you'll see there's garbage in the garbage cans. There's tools laying on the floors. These guys, I modeled it to where they're changing shifts. You know, the outgoing shift and the ingoing shift are talking to each other about what the situation is, you know. Barrels, boxes. Let's see. And I'm pretty proud of my chain hoist there. I like the way that came out. But all the tools and everything on the tables, a lot of detail going in the shop there. You see I laid tools on the benches and everything else, buckets, you know, bicycles, you name it, tool boards. And this is with the machinery. I had more machinery than would fit in the machine shop. So I put the machinery that I didn't want to put in the machine shop, I put it into the back of the roundhouse. And there may have been some there. I don't know, because there are no pictures in the back of the roundhouse. The only pictures inside the roundhouse are looking at the locomotives themselves. They're not looking at the details inside of the roundhouse. If you look all the way up to the top, that bench, I forget who makes those castings. If you spend your time painting them, really precisely, they're fantastic. But it's really more of an S scale. It's marketed as an HO scale, but it would fit a lot better in S scale. It really looks oversized, so I didn't put any people next to it, because then you'd have a frame of reference with this person looks like a midget compared to it. But the workbench after it was done looked so good I had to use it. I couldn't not use it. All right, and this is just painting details. There was a million details. I don't know how many individual details I put into this thing. You'll get a better idea of it when you see the completed structures. Anybody got any questions at this point? Am I still on, or am I talking to myself?
No, you're doing great, Dan.
Okay, I just want to make sure, I'm still got my link and nobody's got, okay. So these machines here, they're from Rio Grande Models and from Scale Structures Limited, most of them. There were a couple of odd machines from other suppliers, but most of them were from those two manufacturers. And once you've weathered them, they look fantastic. And there was a question about the coloring that I used, because I painted everything green on our HOn30 group. And this is a thing from my childhood. When I was in wood shop and everything else, metal shop and all that, when I was in junior high and high school, all of our machinery was this olive green color, and I'm sure that they got a deal from one vendor, but it is a very common green color for machinery. You see it all over the place. Not everybody uses it, but I have a soft spot in my heart because of my days in shop when I was a kid. So all of mine is green. Okay. Now, like I said, I use this drawing a lot, and the circles there are where doors are. I was counting up how many doors do I need to make, and making sure that I didn't miss any. But I decided while I was working on the machine shop that the north side of it is on the track side, and it's away from the operator when you're sitting in the aisle, operating the railroad. And I just decided, I'm going to leave a few of those out, and just leave it brick just for simplicity. But, you can see what I did on this. You can see the blueprint. And then what I did is I just took paper and lined it up along the flat edges of the walls in between the back of the roundhouse and the car shop is what you see on the left side of the photo there. So I laid the paper down and then drew onto the paper where all of these angles were supposed to be in the lines for the outer walls and inner walls, taped it together, then laid it down on plastic, and then cut it on the plastic using the paper template to get the shape right and so that everything would butt up against the walls properly once I put it in the middle there. Okay. And also while I was at it, this is actually the plastic. The tape on the plastic is just holding it while the glue dries. But this is, I'm roughing things in on this to make sure that all this machinery, the blacksmith shop stuff, the stuff in the stock room, the office details, that everything's going to fit in to the structure when I build it. And I moved things around and adjusted things. I couldn't fit all of the machinery in. I had to make allowances for, what would they've done in reality. Things like making sure there's enough space in between machinery where they would have been able to operate, where they would have been able to, feed raw materials into the machines without a machine being in the way, all this kind of stuff. And I've got some photos coming up of the interior of the prototype, the real one. Probably the biggest concession that I made was looking at this is viewing it as you're going to be operating the thing. In the prototype, the machinery was 90 degrees to the machinery that I put in the model. But the problem with that was that you're looking at the ends of all the machinery and you're not getting to really enjoy the model because all you're seeing is the ends of the things. So I purposely put everything 90 degrees to what it actually was so that you could see the machinery, because it's really great detail. So that's a concession that I made. And trying to put it in the other way actually crowded it so badly. I don't know how they operated really. And you'll see what I mean later on. So now I've got the floor in, same way I did the roundhouse, using 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch basewood or whatever, to build it up so that the edge of the foundation looked like a concrete slab and whatnot. And those are the walls roughed in. I didn't glue all the walls in place. I left some of them off, and I didn't glue the thing down yet either. That's just set in place in there, the central shops. I could, at this point, what you're looking at, I could lift that out and remove wall sections so that I could work on the thing on the workbench. But this is just looking at it from 2 different angles so you can really get an idea of how the thing is coming together. And, you see how they had, originally those walls on the roundhouse, I imagine, were just brick, and then they cut out doors as they expanded the shops. It may have been that way from the beginning, or it may not, I don't know. But the way they shoehorned the shops into the property that they had available, it's hard to say. All right, so now I'm starting to add some detail. I got to get a drink. I'm going hoarse. All right, so this is the stock room. I did it first because it was easy. I didn't have to place machinery where it would make sense with the belt and pulley system or anything else. So I just got that in there because it was a quickie to get started and feel like I was getting somewhere. And there's another shot of it from above. And, anything that looked like it could have been in there, I put in there, And that's seeing it from the direction of the roundhouse. So one of those open bay doors into the back of the roundhouse goes up against this. And then that's looking at the stock room as you're looking at it from the machine shop from the direction of the roundhouse. And that's looking at it from above, a little bit better shot going on there, a little better focus. All right, but I was really digging it at this point. I'm like, okay, I really can visualize how the rest of this is going to come out. At this point, I've got the detail in the roundhouse done. I've got the detail in the stock room done. Now it's just doing the interior of the office, blacksmith shop, and the car shop.
Hey, Dan,
Yeah.
I like how you have sheet metal in 1 or 2 slides earlier.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, the sheet metal. Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. All right. And let's see. These, I think all the details here, the office equipment, I think it was Scale Structures Limited, but I'm not positive. And let's see, you can see the card files. There's a table with drawers in the middle. There's a pot-bellied stove. That's the smoke going, or the flue, whatever you call it, going up into the window. The roll-top desk I liked a lot. It looks better from the front than the side. And then you can see there's a scissors phone up there at the top of the roll-top desk. That's actually, an old style scissors phone where they would pull it out from the wall and talk. And they're having a discussion about something, There's another angle of it. I particularly like the guy's mustache. He looks like he's in charge. Looks like he's upset about something. And then let's see. If you look up on the wall there, that's from the 1908 survey. That's the Madrid branch. And I got that out of on the, what is it? Road to Rangeley or whatever the hell it is. One of one of the other books. I copied it out of that, put that up on the wall. And there's, with the wall in place, which isn't glued in at this point, you know, it's just sitting there. But there's the other wall with the door going out into the blacksmith shop area, and bookshelves and all that kind of stuff. All right. And here's the blacksmith shop. And, you know, again, those are real grand or scale structures limited, or, you know, wherever I can find things. You know, some of it's other manufacturers, I'm sure, but, you know, I don't keep track much of what comes from where. I just use what I can, you know. So he's hammering on a pulley. And let's see. And I wanted to put a bellows in here for the hearth there, you know, but the bellows wouldn't fit in right. So that's actually an electric compressor that's over to the right side of the hearth. And there's a cooling table and forcing cones and, you know, everything else, anvils, buckets of water, all the stuff you'd find in a blacksmith shop, you know, hoses on the walls and all of it. And here's the car shop, looking at it from the blacksmith shop. And that's just, you know, with the machinery just stuck in to make sure that there's enough room for it to go in where I want it. And I couldn't put all the machinery in the car shop that I wanted to. I have some machine tools that just wouldn't fit. And this is showing you, when you saw the blueprint before and there were 2 tracks going in from the west end of the car shop, this shows you, you know, they got rid of one of the tracks, put in the coal shed. And here, like I was saying, there were some exceptions on the doors. Some of them had the framing on the outside. This is one of those that had the framing on the outside. And the car shop is still there. You know, we were doing train shows in there a while back for the pandemic. And let's see. And there's the car shop. I tore off a wall because, and this is my first attempt at the pulley drive system. And I realized after I had the wall in there that I wasn't going to be able to get my hands in there and do work on the belt drive system. So I had to rip the wall off. But I put in those, those girders for the roof and the supporting poles, which were there. That's part of the original, so that I could put the belt drive pulley system up on that, with the wall off so I could get at it. And that's my first attempt. I'm not happy with how it came out. But the thing is when you're viewing it from the side with the X-Acto knife. That's the side toward the aisle. So the wall blocks these belts. And you'll see what I mean here. They did not come out good. There should be some tension on them, and they look like, you know, black construction paper, you know. But that was my first attempt. And here it is with some, you know, details. There's sawdust on the floor, guys using a table saw. There's a guy picking stuff off of the shelf back there for whatever he needs to do. And this is something that I haven't run into before. When you look at these figures, you know, I put gray washes and then I dry brush with oyster white all of my stuff. That's how I weather it. It's my standard weathering. And these guys are 3D printed, and they're the first 3D printed figures that I've used. And the dry brushing comes out real funky on them, not like a cast figure. And I guess that's because it's layered in slices as it's printed, you know, but I'm not happy with the weathering on those guys. But at least it just looks like they're covered in dust or something, you know, when you're looking at it. And there is a real belt drive system in the Phillips machine shop. And if you look in there, you can see there's wheel lathes, there's drill presses, you've got shears, you've got, there's a big metal planer over there, a lot of things going on. And if you look up at the roof of this thing, there is a whole lot of pulley system and a whole lot of belt drive going on. And I had to learn how this stuff worked to make it make sense in my shops. because when you buy the stuff from Scale Structures Limited, they have the belt drive systems and everything. And the drawings that they include didn't make sense to me. And then I learned that because they wouldn't work. You know, it looks cool, but the stuff that he puts into the kit wouldn't work. You know, there's a clutch system that he uses that essentially does nothing. You know, nobody else knows but me probably, but it bothered me enough to where I actually started going on YouTube and looking at shops with belt drive systems to see how they really work.
Dan,
Right.
what did you use for the belts themselves?
What I did was, and you'll see it coming up, I used construction paper. And that was another thing I didn't like about this one. I used black construction paper. I don't know what I was thinking. You know, you're under the hood of your car and all your belts are black, right? So I made black belts. And
Yeah, they're
then
leather.
after I did it, I'm like, God, they're leather. What was I thinking? You know, they're all leather, you know?
I hadn't
So-
noticed until you said it, though.
Yeah. So, you know, like I said, this was a learning experience right here. I learned how not to do it, you know? And so if you look at this picture of the original shop, you'll see in the back part there, you'll see there's a clock on a wooden wall. To the right of that clock is the door that goes into the office. And then to the right of that, you'll see two windows on the side of the wall. And then there's another window to the left of the clock, but it's smaller than the windows to the right. Okay. And so that is my version of the office right there. I put a bigger window to the left of the door because it was just easier for me, you know, do one size of window and get it done, you know. And it was in the northwest corner of the machine shop at the end of the tracks that came into the shop. Now, if you're looking at this picture right here, you'll see you're looking from the direction of the track. So behind you is the east end of the shop. Behind you would be where the roundhouse is. There's the track and the pit for working on locomotives or whatever they were working on. Straight ahead to the right, that's the west wall of, or excuse me, the east wall of the office. If you look to the left of the office, those windows there, those large ones on that far wall are where the wall that on the other side of that wall is the blacksmith shop. And if you look closely at all this machinery that's in there and you look back at this one, I spent a lot of time looking at these photos, and they actually moved the machinery out around a lot. You know, here's another shot of the machinery. Here's another shot of machinery. This is at the southwest corner of the machine shop. If you were looking to the right from here, you'd see the office at the opposite wall over there, far to the right. This metal lathe moved around 2 or 3 times. You know, the drill presses, you see that big machine and the real dark one in the middle of the photo, that's a metal lathe. That turned sideways, it moved left, it moved right. So if you look really closely, they kept moving stuff around. Must have been a pain in the ass, and I'm sure they had reasons for doing it. I don't know why.
I'm sure they got new machinery or they needed to do a lot of work on one thing. So they found that it was easier to just move it.
Yeah, and I think also, if we go back,
It might have only had so much of a belt drive too, that they had to get machines underneath it. This photo is interesting because it shows all the wheels.
Yeah, it shows the wheels. And now see, all of the photos that you see of the inside of the machine shop are looking at that wall. They're looking from the east side of the shop toward the west, and you never see what's in the rest of the shop. So if you're looking at all those wheels stacked up, to the left of those wheels, everything to the left of that and behind you is a mystery. There aren't any photos. So, you know, you got to make up a lot of this stuff, you know?
Hey, Dan.
And if you look at all of the belt drives up there, you can see that they changed a lot of the belt drive between that shot and this shot.
Hey, Dan?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So one of the reasons that they move machines is for flow of work. So the modern WWF Railway Museum has gotten, large machines and now larger and larger machines. And it's not just a matter of space. It's a matter of, moving a wheel set from here to there. You know what I'm saying? From the press to the lathe to the whatever. And a lot of it has to do with the flow of work.
Yeah. And I figured too, because in the early days they were working with, like Sandy River 6 and 7, at the end years they're working on 23 and 24, so that I'm sure that a lot of the size increase in the stuff they were working on, like you're saying, things changed over the years. And
that prior photo, one of the interesting things I think is the pit and what's carrying the rails over the pit. It almost looks like wood beams that might be sitting on a ledge, or I don't know. It's hard to tell.
I think those are really big I-beams or concrete I-beams, steel or concrete I-beams. That's what I think. They're thick as hell, whatever they are, And I don't know if they, set them into the concrete when they laid it in or not. There's a lot of mysteries, and you have to do a lot of interpreting when you're working on this. All right. And that's just, some of the details I add, like the slate sink and the fire buckets on the wall and, push brooms and towels hanging off of the wall and things like that. Adds a lot to it. And these are the guys that were doing the work. So, when you're looking for figures, if you're looking for figures, guys in oilskins from a ship would look more like the right figures than workmen. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense. But these guys almost look like they're all wearing oilskins and coveralls, They'd look right at home on a boat. This is, let's see, this would be the southwest corner. That's an atrocious, boiler there. But I had it, it came with something else, I think. And I'm like, okay, well, it looks like crap, but I'm going to paint it up, put it in there. And I added some piping and stuff. And it's on the wall that's, you don't see it much anyway, because it's on the wall from the aisle, the door to the right there that goes into the blacksmith shop. And I added bins with coal for the boilers and coal shovels and, whatnot, wheelbarrows moving coal in. And this is another shot that's looking toward the shop there. The guy that's at the table, he's a bricklayer, but he looked like he was doing something, and you can't tell what he's doing, right? He's buttering a brick for making a brick wall. But nobody knows but me. Now you guys know. But he looked like he was doing something, and I needed somebody who looked like they were doing something at the table. We got guys working on machines, tools laying on the floor and things like that. There's another shot. And this is looking toward the back of the roundhouse. And I did the same thing as I did with the roundhouse, the track going into the machine shop. I didn't put the pit in there because it would have complicated it so much. It was complicated enough as it was. So I'm going to do the same thing. Sometime I might go back in there and just paint in between the tracks black to make it look like shadow, like there's a pit there. All right. And now what I did at this point, I've got everything on the floor that's going on the floor. Everything's glued down. Nothing's moving at this point, right? Because I learned from the car shop, get the floor done, get the details on the floor done, and then work from the bottom up. Because once you got the stuff over it, you can't be reaching down in there and doing something. It's too late because it's too hard to get in there. So at this point, I used brown craft paper. I was a lot more accurate when I cut the strips so that they're uniform all the way down the strip. When you overlap it, you can't see the joint. And I made them extra long so I have plenty of it to work with and don't come up short by accident on anything. You can always cut off the extra, but you can't add any in without going through a nightmare, you know? So all of the pulleys are in place that are on the floor. They transfer the power from vertical to horizontal to some of the machines. And all of the belts are fed in. Then you go in, add the guards or add the I-beams at the top, and then you glue in the brackets that hold the shafts to drive the pulleys. You have to drill the holes through these things because they don't have holes in them. You know, the rod, you can't just put it through. So you have to pre-drill all your pulleys. And then when you see, if you look right in the middle, you'll see a couple of the cones that the belts go over. They're different diameters. There's 4 different diameters on the cone. And then they correspond with 4 different diameters of cone on the machine itself that are pointing in the opposite direction. That's how they changed the speed of the machine. So if you were working on a real dense, thick metal and you needed to slow the machine way down, you could adjust the belt over on the pulley system to slow down the machine, you know. If you needed a high speed, then you'd move the belt in the opposite direction to speed it up, okay? And in some places, I had to cut the rod and just drill part way into those cones from each end because the cone is so long, you're just going to end up breaking drill bits. And once it's broken off in there, you're screwed. So you just drill in like, you know, 1/16 of an inch at either end, same diameter as a rod, and then kind of almost like not Lincoln logs, like Tinker Toys, you know, sticking them in the ends to put it all together. So once you got the rods with the pulleys and the cones all in place over the machinery, then you just take one end of, and you've glued the strip of paper to the bottom pulley on the machine itself, so it won't move. So then you take that back side as you're looking at it of the belt, glue it to the back side of the pulley or cone, then wrap the other one from this side, from the viewer side, over and glue it onto the back side of the pulley or cone. So that way you don't see the joint where you glued it together, so that the belt looks continuous and you don't see those loose ends and stuff like that. With those steel columns that are holding up the girders, the I-beams for the rafters, those, you know, they were there anyway, you know, they're in the blueprints, but that really allows you to tighten those belts up a lot because it prevents you from pulling the girders down and bowing them while you're tightening up belts and gluing them in place. That way you can get the belts a lot tighter than I did in the car shop. And if you look over in the lower center, you'll see where the flue for the boiler is sticking up. I still have to add in those, the smokestacks going from the boilers up. But to the right of the boiler, there's it's a 150 horsepower steam engine with a huge flywheels on it. And that's what powers the entire shop. So that spins, let me see if I can. It's hard to tell. All right, maybe this one. Okay, all right, this one you can kind of see it. So you see the boiler over to the left. To the right of that, that's a 150 horsepower steam engine. The belt comes from the flywheel up onto that first pulley you see to at the bottom edge of the photo. The first pulley you see with the belt, that drives that shaft. Then you look kind of middle of that, you'll see a belt that runs all the way up to the middle shaft in the machine shop. That just transfers power from the first shaft to the second shaft. And then you'll see to the right of that, there's another belt that goes to the next drive shaft up toward the top of the photo. So those just transfer power from one rod to the next. And then there are clutches that you engage on each one of those rods. So if you didn't want, like say you had to stop work on something, you reach up, grab the lever, push it to the left or right, and it would disengage the clutch for that shaft, which would disengage it from all of the pulleys to stop it from spinning. So that's how they work these things. They'd get the steam engine running, get that first shaft going, and then as they needed to use equipment, they'd engage clutches on those individual shafts to transfer power to whichever machines you needed. And if you go by the kit, it doesn't work that way and it makes no sense.
Are you watching a show without me?
What's that?
Nothing, Dan.
Okay. All right. So anyway, these are some, good different angle shots. You can see it's really starting to get busy in there, All right. Let's move down. Okay. And there's my last shot. Okay, there you can really see that 150 horsepower steam engine down the lower right corner. I love that kit. It's just ballsy, All right, so I did the same thing in the shops that I did in the roundhouse with the lighting, the just plug system, the black paper discs, shaped into cones. And these are just a few different shots from different angles because I really was digging it at this point. I really love the way it looks at night. And you can see I haven't set this assembly in on the layout yet. This is on the workbench. And then set in place, that's what the whole complex looks like. The only thing that's not lit in this shot is the stock room. Right there at the joint between the roundhouse and the machine shop, facing you is the stock room. And I ran out of LEDs, but I got some more in so I can light that too. And at first I was like, maybe they don't have the light on in there, They didn't always have it on, I'm sure. But then I'm like, no, because it looks so cool, I have to light it too. So I still got to stick that in. But anyway, that's the shops at night. And let's move on a little bit. And with it in place in its natural habitat, on the layout. So like if you're operating it, I took some shots just so you can get an idea of what it looks like in place. And this is looking east from the west end of the yard with the Phillips station on the left. And, if you look in the bay doors, you can see there's actually stuff going on inside the shops, so that's cool. And here's another shot from a different angle so you can see the way the shops curved around the track. They built it to what they had, And this is looking from basically the same direction but further back. But you can see the coal shed, the door into the car shop and all of that, pretty much the same direction, different angle further back. And then this is from the east end of the roundhouse. And you can see the ball signal over there to the right of the turntable. And 24 is pulling a freight. And number 9's coming out of a stall heading for the turntable. And there's another angle of it. And I apologize for the plastic in the background. I was working on the area over by Reed's over there. And I should have taken the plastic off before I took the shots. And there's looking from the direction of the International Mill, looking up the track with the roundhouse on the left. And there's from the same direction, prototype shot. Although you're standing in front of the ball signal at the edge of the turntable in this shot. But, you can see the tracks go where they're supposed to. The roundhouse and all the shops are where they're supposed to be. The Wilbur track, is where it's supposed to be heading off there to the right of the Phillips station. You can see that octagonal structure to the right side of the photo. That's the hose house for when they had to fight fires. So it's in the right place. I try to make sure that everything is pretty much where it's supposed to be. All right. And then that, okay, she just gave me the heads up. I got 15 minutes left. And that's the presentation. Anybody got questions?
Absolutely stunning, Dan. That's
Well, thank you.
amazing modeling.
It is.
Yeah,
I
that is,
appreciate it.
that's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I still got to add, if you look over on the car shop and the machine shop, I still have to put some skylights on there. And I still need to put the smokestacks from the boilers up there. And the mystery smokestack, the real tall one, I got to figure out where it's going to go. But I think that's about it. I got to do some reinforcing on the roof in the machine shop because it kind of wonky. So I'm going to put some strips inside the roof to flatten it out better so it doesn't have the wave in it.
Dan, you talked about adding soot in the floor of the roundhouse.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
How'd you do that? Is that from an airbrush or just soot?
No, it's dry brush.
Dry
It's
brush.
dry brush. Yeah, I've got an airbrush and compressor. I've got a couple of them and I've never used them. I'm just comfortable with, there we go. Yeah, that's all dry brushed.
That's great dry brushing. Wow.
Well, thank you.
That is really nice.
Yeah, I call it my standard technique. You know, I put gray washes on everything. And then after the gray wash is dried, then I dry brush on oyster white to highlight it. Like if you look at that table there, you'll see the oil can's got dirty oil leaking out of it, right? But that I think that was a little bit of overzealousness when I was putting on the gray wash. But yeah, that's all dry brushed.
Hey, Dan,
Someday I'll actually learn how to use the tools that I've got.
Hey, Dan, that
Yeah.
nighttime shot was amazing, where it just had the whole complex at night. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, you got the right coloring and the lighting.
Yeah, that one.
Nice
Yeah,
yellow
that's
lights.
Oh, boy.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's really impressive. Really impressive.
in my fantasy world, for an operating session, the way I imagine it going is with the window shade down and the lights turned out, you're starting out pre-dawn, right? You know, getting everything ready to operate for the day. And then as you start operating with a fast clock going, you got the rheostat hooked up to the lights in the room so that as the fast clock moves, it gets brighter and brighter until it's daylight. And then at the end of the day, it starts dimming down. And then you turn the lights on in the facilities and the houses so that it shifts to night. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but in my head, that's the way I want it to work, you know.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Impressive.
So where in Texas are you?
Georgetown, it's about a half hour north of Austin.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Is there still an ECMO? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of information on the East Broad Top with their machine shop, and there's a lot of pictures that show you all the equipment there.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject in itself, you know, trying to figure out how all this stuff worked, you know. I learned a lot doing this. I learned a ton doing this. And none of my locomotives hit the walls on the way in. That's something I'm real proud of.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dan, I got in a little late, but do you know the flooring in all these buildings? Was it all concrete or was it a mix of flooring types or?
Let me go back. All right. Okay, can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Moving around?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, on this blueprint, if you could see it, you know, the way I could see it, you know, full size.
Mm-hmm.
This whole area over here is concrete.
Okay,
And
sort
then
of.
this area back here,
through
the back,
middle?
yeah, the whole, like, okay, you got like, you know, I don't know how to call it, section, section, right?
Right.
These two all the way around are concrete. And then here over to, I want to say it was up to this wall was cinders.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they extended the roundhouse with the other 5 stalls, they put in concrete over here.
Yeah, I only got in the roundhouse once before it burned the final time, and I remember seeing cinders, but I don't, have a clear idea of what all the flooring was. I know there were some
Yeah.
pits, but,
Yeah,
that
it's
was when it was in manufacturing use.
yeah. Most of this is concrete. This area back here is cinder. This was concrete. The car shop was wood floor, and I think it was concrete over here in the stock room. And I can't remember the blacksmith shop. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was concrete, but I'm not sure. I can't see it, clear enough to read.
Right.
And, like I said, for simplicity, it was such a complex project anyway. I just made everything concrete.
Yeah.
Oh, except for I did make the car shop wood floor,
Yeah.
but everything else I made concrete.
Yeah. Well, fantastic model.
Yeah, thank you. I got 7 minutes to get out of here. So, because I'm at the library, I had to, get a room. So I'd have, I don't have good internet at the house. So I have to reserve a room here at the library. And she already told me it's time to go. So thank you, everybody. Hope you liked it.
Thank you, Dan.
That was
Thank
great.
you, Dan. That was
Yeah.
impressive.
that was
Thank you so much
terrific.
for doing that.
You.
Thank you, Dan. That was beautiful. It's great.
Thanks,
I'm
Dan.
glad you liked it. Okay, I got to sign off.
Okay.
Talk to you later.
Bye, Dan.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
All right.
Good night.
Well, I'm stunned.
It's time
That
to go
was
tear up our own railroads.
I mean, Chris, I thought HOn30 was dead. Oh my God.
Apparently not.
How could you tell that was HO?
No, I mean, if he'd said that was ON2, I said, yeah, I believe that. But that's just wow. It's
Wow,
amazing.
That is. So
That was incredible.
Well, I'll help you with the question you had. If you can see that picture. These are wood beam, not steel beam or concrete. This isn't cinder, it is concrete. So there's 2 questions, I guess.
Well, Gary,
They look like wood beams to me, so I agree with that.
yeah,
they-
Gary, that area might be a wheel drop area. Because it looked like at the end of the track, there was like a set of stairs or something.
Those, well, I can't go back to his PowerPoint, and I don't have that drawing handy. But that track is the first 2 stalls, so it'd be stall 1 and 2, which were longer than the rest of them. So that's what you're looking at there.
He was actually showing the track inside the machine shop, but yes,
Engine house. There were no machines in the engine house, period.
Yeah.
But that's a
Yeah,
boiler.
I think he put those in there because he had extra ones.
That he's talking about is from the boiler. There was a boiler in the engine house.
makes sense to have the boiler in the engine house. Actually,
He didn't ask me for this, but I guess I would have helped him with his machine layout problem.
Yeah, now he could have used it, right?
Right.
Don't do that to him.
He's not here. I can't.
has he glued the walls on yet? I think he glued the walls on yet. So
I think he glued all the machinery too. So
yeah, exactly. I don't know. The word is still stunning. I mean, there's so much detail
it
on
doesn't
that.
matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
Matter to me.
No.
I like the way he did the walls, the inside and the outside. No, that's
Yeah.
nice.